Good morning and welcome to this week's Hometown Hero podcast. My host, Mary Staffel, and we've got a exciting morning today with a Vietnam veteran, Bill Pugh. And Bill's been sharing some stories with me and just incredible stories. So, Bill, welcome to Hometown Heroes.
Well, I'm glad to be here. And if I could start it out, I arrived in country in Bien Hoa in January 5th of 1970. And that was the repo depot for Vietnam. And I got orders for the 4th Infantry Division, which were then located at Pleiku in the Central Highlands. And out of Bien Hoa, I flew on a double prop job to Pleiku. And when I got into Pleiku, there was hardly anything there. There was an army base, just Campanori, I think it was. But as soon as I got off the plane, or there was a number of us got off the plane, it took off right away. And I was just stunned by the mountains, the ruggedness and the height of them. And to give you a little idea of what we operated in, it's called the AO, the Area of Operation. The Central Highlands, as it explains, is in the central part of South Vietnam. It's over 3,500 square miles. Of course, we didn't operate in all of that. That's a lot of territory. I looked up in Google, there's 4,561 named peaks.
My goodness.
The highest peak was 10,130 feet. Now, when I first saw this, I just went, oh my God. I'm from Colorado, and we got over 50 peaks that are 14,000 feet, but these peaks start at a base of about 6,000 feet. So these mountains were impressive, and they were rugged, and they were mostly triple canopy jungle. And along with that, now that's the area we operated in. It had been the original home of the Montagnards, and the Montagnards in French means mountain dweller, and in Vietnamese, I think it means Highlander. So it referred to the indigenous people that lived in the mountains. But they had all been removed or relocated, I should say, to out of the mountains. So what you basically had was a fair fight. You had full regular NVA units, and you had U.S. infantry units. There were no civilians. And what it was considered was a free fire zone. And the motto was, if it moved, kill it. And so as bad as war is, that is as fair as you could probably get. And that's where we were at. And when I landed in Pleiku and rode a deuce and a half over to Campanori, which wasn't far away, I found out that the group that I was going to meet, my squad leader was going to be Ned, they were still in the jungles fighting. So I was killing some time, but in the meantime, I wasn't, because then I found out what I had to carry as a grunt. They gave me my rucksack. Some of the guys showed me what the better sea rations. Now, sea rations were canned food, and they were heavy. And then also we had to carry four sticks of C4 plastic explosives for the demolition guys. They showed me how to hook up a machete to the back of my rucksack so that when I was walking in the jungles, all I had to do was reach up with my right hand and pull the machete out. You needed the machete all the time, especially for walking a point and cutting your way through the jungle. And also in the rucksack, you had a shovel, and the shovel was an entrenching tool, they call it, but that was heavy. And then I carried 4 canteens of water. You know how heavy water can be. Then I carried a lot of ammo for the M16. They were called bandoliers, and they were pouches that carried 10 clips of M16 ammunition, and they were in like a cloth pouch, OD in color, and you'd strap them around your waist. Well, I had 5 of those, so I had 50 clips of M16 ammo that I was carrying.
Bill, I've got a picture. Is this you or is this another?
No, this is my friend Simon Bishke. I put that picture in there to show you what the M60 machine gunner looked like. You can see all the rounds that he had down below. Well, each one of the grunts we carried a couple of belts of the M60 ammo, and it was crisscrossed our chest. We looked like banditos if you've seen them in the movies with all the ammo.
But you carried your own ammunition for your weapon.
That's correct. That was the 50 clips of M16.
And then you carried ammunition for the machine gun.
Absolutely.
And you carried a mortar round too for the mortars.
We carried a mortar round, and that sucker was heavy too. And if you were squad leader, you also carried a law, which was a rocket. It's like a bazooka, and that was about it. But I think when you got down to the whole thing, I would say, depending upon how many canteens and how much ammo, I never wanted to run out of ammo. I hardly ever fired on full automatic because I'd always heard horror stories of American GIs firing too much and running out of ammo. I would estimate that you were carrying anywhere from 45 to 60 pounds, 65 pounds when you went out. And of course, you had your steel pod on. And so about the time that I was there for like 3 days before the unit came in. And when they came in, they went on a stand down. Now, stand down, these guys stunk and they looked rugged. And I mean, their clothes were all shredded. They had hardly any sleeves left. And that was from the elephant grass, which had razor sharp edges. And they had all kinds of bandages across their hands and arms. And I soon found out why, because this terrain would just tear you to shreds. Yeah, if you see this picture right here, I don't know if anybody can see it, but I'm missing my sleeve on my right shoulder. That would have been ripped off. And then Jeff, the guy next to me, we were posing here at Firebase Arnold's Trail. He has all those bandages on him, and I have one on mine. That was from all the scratches and the tears that you got walking through the jungle. So we were just about ready. Now that's Firebase Arnold's Trail. But anyway, we were about ready to head out, and I was introduced to Ned and my squad. And of course, you're new meat. You're a new man in town, and everybody wants to know where you're from, what's happening back in the world, and are the American girls still pretty? I mean, everybody, and then pretty soon everybody breaks out. But getting back to the stand down, when these guys came back and were so raunchy looking, they strip them bare, they take away all the weapons, they burn their clothes, they put them to a shower. A lot of guys just got their heads shaved. I always did because I didn't want to mess with it. And it's a stand down, and they bring out all this beer. They bring out, pallets of beer. And then they bring out huge blocks of ice, and you had to roll this hot beer in the ice. And then they bring out all kinds of little cooking grills, and they start fixing your hamburgers and stuff, and they let these guys go wild. But that's why they take away all the weapons. So that's a last for about 3 days. And after you get over that, well, I got there just for the stand down. And I thought, well, hell, this isn't bad. Well, about 3 days later, they're getting ready to head out on the first mission, and I'm going with them. So my first story on this is called Severe OJT. Let me take a sip. And I've got all of this equipment on. I've got at least 65 pounds. And I'm with Ned. Ned wants me to go on the first bird. And two guys get back to back or side by side on the inside. You got the pilot, co-pilot, two guys on the inside, two guys with their legs, grunts with their legs on the outside on one side. And me, I was on the left side. I was right next to the door gunner. So there's 6 grunts and 4 crew members. And of course, we had been trucked out to the landing pad or the launching pad, and the red dust is kicking up. And I'm going, I've never been in a helicopter. And all of a sudden, Ned goes, it'll be okay. He hands me a pick. I'm going, what the hell is this? A pick? I had a pick in my right hand, and my M16 was over my shoulder, but it was basically in my left hand. And I'm sitting on the edge of this helicopter. I'm going, what do I hold on to? And all the next thing I know, I didn't have much time to think about it because I am going over the bunker line. We're flying over it. Next thing I know, we're about 500 feet up. This guy is headed forward. He takes a bank left, and I'm looking straight down. And I'm going, holy God almighty. And I forgot about centrifugal force. But I can tell you my bladder didn't. And he straightened up, and I'm just, my heart is just pounding, and I just can't believe that I wasn't trained for this. And all of a sudden behind us, I can see there all the rest of the birds. I don't know how many there were, 15, 20. We were inserting a whole company, so approximately 6 GIs to a bird. And we had, in a company level, maybe 140, 150 guys. So that tells you maybe they had to go back and get some more. I don't know. I don't know the math. But anyway, I didn't realize we were going to be the first bird in. And as we got up, we get quite a few 1,000 feet or more up. I started to appreciate the incredible ruggedness and the mountains that we were flying over. And I noticed that all of the rest of the choppers were behind us. And finally we nestled, we're pretty high up, over a valley, and all of a sudden I noticed we start going into a huge circle, and I noticed all the birds behind us are following on us, and they're all separated. They've got a certain separation that they kept. Well, I still didn't dawn on me. We were first bird in, and he just starts peeling down as fast as he can go, and way down in the front in the valley, on the side of a mountain, you can see that there was a hole in the jungle, and that was our landing area. That was our LZ. Well, now we were the first bird in, and nobody told me anything about this. And as you get down, he's coming head down into this landing zone. He feathers it. He moves up and he moves back, and that's the way to slow him down. Then he starts rocking back and forth. Well, the blades were popping such that it sounded like somebody was firing at us. And all of a sudden, the door gunners open up. I didn't realize that that's what the door gunners do a lot on the first bird in. They just spray the line just to make sure the bad guys weren't waiting for us. And so we got to the point where about 5 feet above the ground, the guy in front of me steps down on the rung below. The 2 other guys step and they jump off. Well, nobody told me to jump off, and I sure as hell wasn't going to jump 5 feet down with all this crap. Next thing I know, the boot is in my back of my rucksack, and I am flying out of the helicopter spread eagle. I've got a M16 in my left, and I've got a pick in my right, and I hit the most god-awful swamp, stagnant swamp, and my head went down. It was about 2 feet deep. My mouth was closed. It started going up my nose. I could taste it. It was putrid. And the rucksack rolled up over the top of my head. And I thought, I'm going to drown right here. And I could just read what my obituary said. Died in ground combat in Vietnam. And I was thinking, that isn't accurate. I died trying to get into ground combat. Well, the next thing you know, they got to get my ass out of there because I'm holding everything up. And of course, the bird's already taken off. The rest of them are all staged and coming in. And Ned and the other guy are dragging me out of there. And I am just sputtering. And I wear glasses. I hate glasses. And they were just a constant source of sorrow for me. And as they pulled me up to the side, and those 6 guys kind of spread out. Ned came over, took one of my canteens and poured it over my head and trying to get the mud off of me. And it was just putrid, the smell. And after a little bit, one bird after the other came in, and guys were just spreading out, doing their job, providing security. And everyone came by me going, what the hell happened to him? And pretty soon, after we'd had enough security, one of the guys in my squad came up and he handed me a lit cigarette. And I said, well, I don't smoke, but thanks. He said, it's not to smoke. It's for the leeches, you fool. I went, what? What leeches? Nobody told me about leeches. Well, I found out. And the cigarette was my best friend from then on, burning leeches off. And as we sat there for a little bit of time, finally, Ned got us together, and the whole company had been inserted. And so everybody was heading out in either squad or platoon size. And because there were trails everywhere that had no grass on them. You knew it was an active area for the NVA. And so here I am, 10 guys in the squad, Ned leading us, and we're going down a trail. And everybody's giving me some room because I stink. And I was about the second to the last guy, and the guy in front of me. Now, I'm also found out after being in the jungle for a couple days, my first mission, that I was new meat. I was like in the hazing stage where they hazed you when you like joined a fraternity, and they were seeing how much I could take to find out what I was made out of. And so far I was showing a lot of not good things. But anyway, the guy in front of me, and this is triple canopy jungle, and the shafts of light coming from the sun were like cathedral lights coming through a stained glass window in a darkened, like big cathedral, with the light shafts were coming down. Well, that's kind of what it was here. These light shafts were coming down. It was actually, the fighting was kind of interesting in a way. And the guy in front of me, and I think he was doing it for my benefit, he started singing, "Please, Mr. Custer, I don't want to go." And he's looking back at me and laughing at me. And I just thought, a week and a half ago, I was in Denver, Colorado, watching the New Year's Day football games with my family and friends, eating turkey, and here I am. And I thought, I better get a grip, because here I am. And Ned told us to stop. We stopped, and we took a knee, and we're waiting. Ned and another guy head up the trail. Started going up a slope, and he wanted to see what was over the top of the hill. And meanwhile, the guy poked me and looked. There were punji sticks sticking up on the side of this trail, and the punji sticks were just bamboo sharpened with human excrement. And I saw one guy actually get one of those in his calf, and he got gangrene right away. So they were I knew what they were, but all of a sudden Ned comes running back with the other guy, and they're all excited. He said, "Get to the left off the trail." He said there were 4 NVA soldiers coming down the trail, and they hadn't seen us. So he said, "We're going to capture him." And I went, "Capture him?" So I got behind the tree, and then the thought goes, did I chamber around? Where the hell's the safety? I knew all this stuff. I was just shook. And I looked down, I looked in front, and I was shaking with my M16. And I thought, I don't think John Wayne did it this way. But anyway, these 4 NVA soldiers walked right in our midst, and we jumped out on them, and they were scared S-less. I'm telling you. And the first one was about 5'10", and he's kind of a distinguished looking guy. Come to find out later on, he was a captain, and he was actually a medical doctor. And the 3 others that we captured were NCOs. And we stripped them totally down naked, and checked them out and make sure. We let them put their clothes back on. They kept their boots on. We tied their hands behind their back. Their rucksacks were filled with documents, and even a regimental flag, it looked like, some kind of NVA flag with names written on it. And of course, 6, which was the reference to our captain, because we were humping with the whole company, and 6 was really excited when he found out that there were 4 captives, and 1 was a captain. And so we took these guys back to our night encampment that we were in. It wasn't too far from where we landed. And we tied the 4 guys to the tree, and we had their feet tied together, their hands tied behind their back. We had them tied to the tree. We took the blindfolds off. And at one point in the night, it was my 2-hour to watch him along with another guy. And I looked at this guy, and you could just see the fear. There was a full moon out, and once in a while you could see the glint of his eyes with the moon, and I could tell he was staring at me. And I knew he was scared. And then I realized what he was really thinking. He said, "Get away from me, GI, you stink." And I mean, all I'm doing is letting this stink dry on me, you know. Well, the next morning, we took we put the blindfolds back on. I think they let them go to the bathroom or whatever. But we took them with our hands tied behind the back, blindfolded. We took them to the LZ to dust them off or take them back to An-Khe as prisoners of war. And when we got to the helicopter, they must have heard of stories of us throwing NVA out of helicopters, and they would not get on that helicopter. So we had to put them on their stomachs, hog tie them, and place them on. We had to hand load them onto the chopper, and we left one grunt with them to guard them so that the crew didn't have to worry about that. And they took off for An-Khe. Last thing I'd heard, they'd gone to some prisoner of war camp, were getting fed well, and were playing soccer during whatever their recreation time was. And they made it out a lot better than the rest of us, I'll tell you that much. And so from dropping them off, we then went into platoon size. All four of our platoons for the company, made up the company or whatever, 5 platoons, went off in different directions. And we went down a trail, and I was in the middle of the unit. Now, this is just the second day in the jungle. Already the first day, I fell in the swamp and almost drowned. We captured 4 NVA soldiers. I said, how much worse can it get? Well, I found out. And as I walked along, the M60 gunner was behind me. He was a pretty good-sized guy. Assistant gunner was behind him. And in front of me was the Prick 25 man. He was the radio guy. It was the PRC 25 radio. And he had somehow gotten out of order. Our lieutenant was named Roki, and we were called Roki's Raiders. And so the radio guy should have been next to Roki, because Roki needs that for all calling in artillery, whatever we had to do. But he had somehow slipped, fell, did something, and he wound up in front of me. So as we're walking through the jungle again, triple canopy, the sun coming through in shafts, we get hit. We get hit from my left side, and it was my first firefight. I only fired a couple of shots. I just hugging the ground as close as I could, and the rounds were just hitting and impacting the trees, impacting the dirt in front of us. The guy behind me, the gunner, had been shot. He had been gut shot, and the guy in front of me had been shot. And they had picked off the communications, I later found out, and the firepower. And the guy behind me had his guts hanging out, and he was screaming. And in all of this fight, the guy in front of me had been wounded in the arm, not severely at all. And but the guy behind me, and I was no more than 3-4 feet from him, was screaming because he was in so much pain. He was lying on his back, and through all of this firefight comes the medic. And the medic kneels down with all of these bullets going by him, and he starts administering to this wounded soldier. And I saw him inject something, and I later found out it was morphine. And that calmed the guy down so that he could work on his wounds. In the meanwhile, the firefight's just going on. This medic I'm hugging the ground right next to him, and he's on his knees doing his job. I have tremendous respect for all the medics. And as they withdrew, and so then we proceeded on. We had to get to a landing zone for dust off. We actually went back to the landing zone that I originally came in on because it was one of the closest, and we dusted these 2 guys off. And so that basically was my first 2 days in the jungle, and that was my severe OJT, on the job training. The next part is I just want to explain to you the day-to-day things that occurred when you were in the jungles. And this is the part where I refer to as Motel 6. I spent 5.5 months in the jungle on the ground. And when you sleep on the ground every night in the jungle, you are a Motel 6 with the light on. And every one of God's little creatures that wants a hot meal or a warm place to spend the night are going to find you. And I found, for instance, there was ticks, all kinds of ticks that you had to pick off. Usually they wound up underneath your armpits at night. You had clipper ants. Clipper ants were Texas fire ants on steroids. You didn't mess with these guys. They ate everything and everything. Mosquitoes, your hand would swell up overnight. But the leeches, I hated leeches. And one morning I woke up there, my left armpit, I knew something big was under there, and I knew what it was. I got to where I loved lighting up a cigarette and burning their ass off of me. They would burn off and they would drop off. And so this is kind of the routine that you went through. Well, one morning I had to take a whiz, and I was right on the edge of the foxhole. And so I just, went out in the trees. And when I was doing my thing, to my shock and horror, I looked down, and there were 3 ticks embedded into the head of Mr. Wrinkles.
Oh my!
I was mortified. I thought, now what do I do? So when I got done, I walked back into the group of about 10 guys in my squad that were all eating breakfast, the sea ration breakfast, heating stuff up. And one guy said, "You look like you saw a ghost. What the hell happened to you?" And he said, "I made my next mistake." I told him what had happened. What's happening here? And then came this deluge of solutions. And the first one of my buddies lit a cigarette, and he said, "Here, I want to watch you burn those 3 puppies off." And the next guy had pulled out his machete and he was pretending to sharpen it. And he said, "I think this is going to call for amputation." And by this time, I am being grilled. Now I am the new meat, so this is the gauntlet that I have to go through. And Ned, the older squad leader, he just looked at me and said, "Go see Doc." Well, now Doc was the medic, but I didn't want to go see Doc. Doc was surly, burly, profane, had a sick sense of humor, and I knew if I described my delicate situation to him, I was going to pay the price. But also, Doc was the same guy that was kneeling next to me when the gunner got killed, and he was good. He was well respected. And so I sheepishly went up there and explained my situation, and he just stared at me. And then I got uncomfortable as hell. And I thought, and then I just blurted out, "Well, do you need to see it?" And the profanity-laced response I got, I can't repeat. If you put it into the popular vernacular of the day, what he said was, and really toned down, "No, I don't want to see your junk." And with that, he turned around and got a small tube of cream or something, salve, out of his magical medical bag. He turned it and handed it to me. And I said, "Well, what do I do with this?" He said, You apply it to the affected area, you dumb grunt." Then I just had to ask another question. "Well, how does that work?" He said, "Well, when you apply it forms a film that cuts off their oxygen, and the little bastards back themselves out and they fall off and they disappear." I went, "Oh." And so I walked back to the group and they were all chuckling. And I know a couple of those guys had gone through the very same thing that I had gone through. So that's my Motel 6. Every night, every morning you got up, this is what you went through looking for. The other thing that every morning, I can see my notes here. Every morning you received a malaria pill. 7 days a week, you received malaria pills. And the medic would come by and give you a malaria pill, and he'd stop and make sure you took the pill. And for 6 days a week, it was a small, little pill. On the 7th day, it was a big pill. And I'll get into that in a minute. But my dad had been in a combat engineer in the Pacific, and he had developed malaria. And he never talked about his war experiences. But when he found out I was going to Vietnam, he said, "You make sure whatever you do, you take the malaria pills," because he had malaria and he had ramifications from it for the rest of his life. And the only thing I really knew is he couldn't donate blood. But he had told me, "Take whatever they give you." So I was. So the 6 days you took the pill, the medic came by. I'm sure he was keeping a log. because if you didn't take your malaria pills, you more than likely were going to get it. And it was a way to get out of the jungle and the fighting. So I think that they kept a log to make sure that you were taking your pills. But the thing about the pill, on the 7th day, the pill was very large and there was no warning signs on it. And after you took it, I'd say 15 to 20 minutes later, if you felt like you had to fart, don't. Because you'd be picked up. So I'm just saying.
Sounds like about mile 5 in a long running race.
Yes. I got to get my glasses back on here. Well, I just wanted to give you that. That kind of gives you the background of all the different things that went on day to day. The other two things that I want to reemphasize that went on every night was called Circle the Wagons. And if you were in a platoon size or a company size, you created a circle, started with foxholes. You dug foxholes. You put your trip flares out if you wanted to, and then you put your claymore mines. And the claymore mines they shot out hundreds of BBs in a 180-degree arc, and they had prongs on the bottom of them that were folded up, and you could unfold them and you just stuck them in the ground. And they had a wire that came out of. They were electrically activated, and you had a wire that went back to your foxhole, and you had maybe 4 or 5 of these clickers. And all you had to do when you wanted to blow a claymore was just pick up the clicker and click it down, and it just cleared out the jungle in front of you. And so we were completely surrounded and circled, whether you were on company level or platoon level. Company level is usually about 150 men, 140, something like that. So that was one thing we did every night. Now, my first story I've got, I called it Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Now, before I start the story, I'll just tell you what, I don't know what that phobia for fear of spiders is, but I got it on steroids. So I'm walking point, and we're going up probably one of the steepest mountains that we had to climb. We have all this weight on us, but it's not too bad because we're walking in grass. Now, this is elephant grass, but it's only about 4 or 5 feet high. It's just the steepness. We're not using ropes, anything like that. It's just a hard climb. And we are paralleling a NVA trail that was well used. It was about 15 yards over to the right. You couldn't see it because of the triple canopy jungle. But they've given me an azimuth. I have a compass. I'm walking point, and I know the general direction that I need to be going. Well, I get a ways up, and all of a sudden I'm walking through 2 huge trees. I mean, these puppies are maybe 10 feet in diameter. They're the big triple canopy trees, and there's about a space of 8 feet between them. As I'm walking through, I'm kind of walking at the ground, looking where I'm going to take my next step. The guy behind me grabs the collar and pulls me back. And as he pulls me back, as I'm just about ready to walk through these trees, I see the biggest ass spider I have ever seen in my life. And I was just petrified. And I'm moving back, and I can see that his web is really intricate, and it's probably 8 feet wide. He's connected it between these 2 trees, and it's probably from top to bottom, maybe 8 to 10 feet in length. And this sucker is the size of a dinner plate, a big dinner plate. But now it had rained that night, and there are all these dewdrops on this intricate web. And the sun is just now starting to pop over the top of the ridge line, and it's shining right down on me. And it was like a 1,000 prisms of light in his web. It made it just look like it was lit up like neon. And the spider itself was like the width of or like a number 2 pencil that you'd have in school, but it was about 10, 11 inches long. He had black legs, but his body had bands on it, like red, yellow, black was the predominant, but it had some gray in it too. And the only thing I can think of, it was probably a giant on steroids garden spider that you sometimes see down here in Texas. That's pretty good size. But this boy was impressive. And all of a sudden, I got a sharp poke in the back, and the guy behind me said, we were platoon size, and 6, our captain was humping with us this morning. And he said, 6 wants to know what the hell the holdup is. Well, I couldn't hardly well send the word back down that Pugh, who was walking point, was afraid of a spider. And that's why we weren't moving. So I knew I had to get moving, and I cut a path off to the left side of this tree, went on up, and when I was about 10 yards up, I looked back down. The spider's still intact. Nobody touched him. And we went up to the top of the ridgeline, and we took a little break there. And then we saw that this ridgeline was not the top. It had curved. We couldn't see it. It curved further on up. 6 came up and said, we're not going to go up this mountain any further. We're going to cut diagonally across and get into that the NVA trail. He said, we're going to get on that. So we got on that trail and started up. And by this time, the sun is pouring. To the left of me is the triple canopy jungle of the ridge line we didn't take. And on the right side of this, now the trail is about 8 feet wide, and it was heavily used by the NVA. And on the right side, as I'm walking up the hill, the jungle's to my left. On the right side, it's a ravine that drops down. Well, it drops a long ways down, but you can see the tops about 25 feet down. You can see the tops of these 80-foot canopy trees. And so if you go over the right side and you fall over, you're probably going to be dead. So we kind of hugged to the left. And as we started going up, the heat is just bearing down. And I wore glasses, and I can't see anything because the sweat's pouring down. And all of a sudden, we get the word that they're going up to check the trail further on up. They tell us to take a break. So when you take a break in the mountains with all that weight on your back, you turn your back to the mountain and you just kind of fall back. I mean, you take a look and you see there's thick undergrowth and then the mountains start. And so you're not going to fall back far. So I fell back, and as I was sliding my butt down to the inner part of the trail, my feet are flat on the ground, my knees are up, and the rucksack gets caught on some of the stuff. It felt good because it took the pressure off your knees. And so my hand, palm down, is on my right hand, is on the ground. And my head, I just kind of leaned back because it was so freaking hot. And I knew that I'm going to have to reach my towel and clean off my glasses. And before I could do anything, the guy next to me, who also leaned into the mountain, said, "Don't move, snake." And so I didn't move, but I moved my eyeballs down to my right side. And between my right hip and my right hand, which was about 6 inches away from my right hip, was a green snake. And he was moving slowly between my two body parts. And I saw my buddy next to me grabbing for his machete, just real slow. And he was I could see what he was going to do. He was going to wait till the snake cleared my hand, and he was going to cut its head off. And I was just hoping he doesn't cut my fingers off, or if he reached a little too far, he'd cut my leg. And sure enough, the snake came out, and he let the guillotine down. And that head snake, I saw it go flying over the ravine and down. In the meanwhile, the body of the snake is writhing around, and it's green, bright green. He takes the machete blade and flips it over the side. And I kind of fell back, took a deep breath, and he looked at me and he said, "Do you know what that was?" I said, "Yeah." That was a 2-step snake. It was what they call a bamboo viper. Some call it a bamboo pit viper, one of the most venomous snakes in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. They call them the 2-step because there's no antidote to this thing. If he's a small snake, but if he gets enough venom in you, you're dead. And if he doesn't get enough venom in you, you're going to wish you were dead. But anyway, and when we were back at Onk, I remember being warned that when you're in the rear area sleeping on a cot and you had take your boots off at night to make sure to check for bamboo vipers in the morning. Well, that was there was a couple of my 9 lives right there gone. Now the next one is kind of a serious one. It was, and I name it Klon, Klon. That was the name of the man that was not in my squad, but another squad. And we are on another mission now, and we're at the base of a mountain. And one mountain over, we were going to go over, and they said that there was a huge complex of tunnels, and that was going to be our job, was to go over this one shorter mountain and get over to the other mountain to blow up this particular complex. And so we were down at the base of this mountain, and right below me, there was a river running, and it was actually very pretty. And so there was a huge tree that had fallen down. We're platoon size. We're dug in for the night down at the base. We're ready to move out. But before we did that, a resupply helicopter came in. And so it dropped off all the normal water, sea rations, ammunition. But this one was special. It had mail. And we always love to get mail. And Klon, he was in another squad. He was just right up above me. Again, this was a tree that's fallen down. It's probably 30, 40 feet long. That was probably 6 feet in diameter. And I was sitting on the log looking down at the lake and down at the river. So I'm looking down slope with my back to the upslope. And Klon's out there. He's behind me with his squad. Well, what he'd had, his wife had baked cookies for him and had sent these big tin cans of chocolate pudding. And he couldn't carry all that stuff. It was too much. So they opened up the pudding, and he was spreading it out. All the guys were lapping it up. I mean, this was a real treat. But there was a big deal in plastic of his wife had made sugar cookies. And so he was passing those out because they wouldn't last in that humidity. And so he was passing them out to his squad. And then he came down to me because he had extra cookies. And he was from Alabama. He had the sweetest smile. He had a wonderful Southern drawl. And he asked me if I wanted some cookies. And I said, I would love it. And he handed me one of the sugar cookies. And so my back still is looking down the mountain. He sat down next to me, but facing up the mountain. And we started talking a little bit. I got to know a little bit about him. And all of a sudden, something hit about 2 feet below my butt. And it ricocheted. I mean, it made a big jolt in this tree that was laying down there. And I saw something yellow behind me bounce off. And all of a sudden, about 10 NVA started firing B40 rockets at us and just firing right down on us. And Klon, who was right next to me, got a round right through the eye. And the force of the blow blew him over the tree onto my side. Now, I had been cleaning my M16 and I had it in pieces. And of course, I'm jumping and the pieces are going everywhere. And so it took me a while to get my weapon back together. And I finally did, and locked and loaded, and I start firing. Of course, our platoon is firing like mad. I mean, there's just a wild firefight going on. And I looked over and saw Klon, and the medic had already gotten to him and was working on him. And in short order, less than probably 5 minutes, artillery was just, our artillery had been called in, and they were just blasting the hell out of the side of that mountain, those NVA, and they withdrew. And I got over to Klon, and I could tell, it didn't look like there was much hope. And in the meantime, our first sergeant came over, and he was a football player at Penn State, about 6'6", is a really nice guy. And he said, "Are you all right?" He already realized Klon wasn't. And he was asking about me. And I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." He said, "Do you realize that I saw what happened? They fired a B40 rocket at you, and it landed about a couple feet below your butt into that tree, and it bounced. And the warhead was sitting right over there, and it had not detonated." And he was warning me. He was warning me to stay away from it, which I did. In the meanwhile, the dust-off came in for Klon, and nobody else was hit. And of course, he died. And that was, it was tough for me because it was the first time I'd seen an American die. And whew, sorry about that. But anyway, if you could fast forward with me real quick, 30 years forward, and I'm in Denver, I'm working, and I start looking, a friend of mine sends me a link to show the people who were killed in Vietnam, and you could look up, I looked up Klon's name, and I knew approximately, 4th Infantry Division. He died in February of 70, and by God, his name came up. And I went into that website, and in there it gave a brief, died such and such a day, what unit he was with. And also in there was an email address, and it was maintained by his daughter. So I emailed her and I said, this is my name. I was with your father when he was killed. If you would care to discuss it all, just give me a call. And I didn't really know whether she would or not. And she did. And 2 weeks later, it was her. And I said that I was with her father, and I said that what a nice man he was, what a great smile he had, and that he had shared the cookies. And she said, yes, I know about the cookies. She said, it was explained to me. And she said, do you realize that when Klon died, my dad, I was born. I was born on the same day.
Wow.
And it just, man, that really got to me. And she said that, what was bad, real bad, was that her mother had suffered a total, complete nervous breakdown and had to be institutionalized, and that she had been raised by her grandparents. And that after she got out of high school, she immediately joined the Army. And then she met her husband in the Army, and they'd both been about 10, 11 years at that point in the Army. And they were career NCOs. And she said that thanked me for the call. She appreciated that. We thanked each other for our service, and then I never heard from her again. She didn't want the details, and I didn't want to give the details of how he was killed. She didn't want them anyway. It didn't matter. But in looking at some obituaries of guys that were killed in Vietnam, I got this one piece, if you don't mind me reading it to you. It says, war is destructive. There are a lot of casualties in a family when a soldier doesn't come home. And that's exactly applied to Klon and his family, and of course applied to every family who has a soldier that doesn't come home. So my next story was, I called it the shootout at the OK Corral. And we're walking up the side of a mountain, and we're company size, 140 guys, and we're probably about a third of the way back from the point. And we're about 20 yards, we're walking up cutting our way up the side of a mountain, and we're getting very close to the top. It's about 20 yards up. You can see the ridge line on our left. And then the word comes back to me from the guy in front of me, a squad member, that we're coming up on a trail to be careful. And it was a well-traveled trail, probably 4 or 5 feet wide. And so you had to, as you were crossing it, you had to have your heads up. And like I said, only about, it wasn't even 20 yards, it was probably about 15, 10 yards up was the crest of this mountain. And the sun was coming down from my left to the right. And as my buddy stepped out, just as he stepped out of the trail, I stepped into the trail. We both saw this dark shadow coming down at us. It was an NVA soldier walking down at us. Well, he had his AK-47, and all I can say is we all three started firing at one time. Us two, and me and my buddy firing at him and him firing at us. I felt a round go past my right ear as I was pivoting around to fire at him. And I felt a ping go off on my helmet. And then we saw the NVA soldier turn around and run up the hill and over the top of the crest, and we lost him. And then all of a sudden, something came rolling down at us, and we thought maybe he had rolled a grenade down at us. but it wasn't. It was his pith helmet. And when my buddy picked it up, there was a bullet hole in the pith helmet right where his forehead would have been. And the inside there was blood spatter. And we realized that one of us had hit him. And then we saw we went up a short distance, we could see a blood trail. But we got word back from 6th that he didn't want us following that blood trail. And we usually, if there was one, there was a lot more around NVA. And so we just kept on moving and finally set up on that ridge line in a company-sized unit, and we circled the wagons. And then I fell asleep. I was so exhausted and emotionally tired. And the next morning, I get a soft kick in the butt from the medic, the rude medic, and he's giving me my daily malaria pill. And he said, "I think you better get up. I want to show you something." So I stood up. Now we're on top of the ridgeline where the NVA soldier had escaped over the top of. And I looked up through the trees. He said, "Look, there were vultures. There were vultures flying." And as the medic walked away, he said, "Looks like you got him." And to tell you the truth, I don't know who got him. It was either me or my buddy. But the main thing was we got him and he didn't get us. And at that point in time, that's the only thing that mattered, was survival. And my buddy had also pointed out, "Look at your helmet." My helmet had a little ding taken out of the camouflage part that fit over the steel pot, and there was a little scratch in the steel pot. I had taken an AK-47 round bounce, just grazed my helmet. But that was a close call. Mm-hmm. The next story I got it now. As I go along here, you can tell my 9 lives are slowly fiddling down here. And the next one really became true. This is the one I call Shot Down. And again, I don't know why, it was my luck. I was either always first walking point or last off the mountain being extracted from a mission. But here I was again. We had been, I think we were platoon size, and we'd all been taken off the mountain. But in this particular case, we were in a mountain range that, and on a ridge line where 2 larger mountain ranges were over the top. We were in the middle. And all of the mountain ranges were at that point, like if you were going up a roller coaster and you had just gotten to the crest of the top, that's where we were on these 3 mountain ranges. They had crested and they were starting to all subduct, I guess you'd call it, down into the valley below. And down in the valley below, there was a little river, and there was a huge mountain coming out of that. I called it the wall. And so what the choppers were having a problem with us was they did not have, where we were on the side of the mountain, they had blown all these trees down to get the landing, to get us in and out. And from the very start, it had something to do with not being able to get enough air under the blades to get enough lift. So instead of 6 guys, they were carrying, in some cases, 3 and 4 guys out. So this took a whole long process. So there was 4 guys left, including me. The bird came in. I went around on the far side and got on with another guy, and we are looking down at the mountain as it's going down. The 2 other guys got on. There was 4 of us. 2 guys got on the mountain that's going up. So, and he's the chopper pilot is trying to move back and forth. He's trying to get enough air to get enough lift, and he's moving the rotor tail as far back in the tree line without hitting it, and then gunning it forward. And he had done that a couple of times. Well, on the 3rd time, and we're starting to come up, a bad guy came out and started unloading 45 rounds of AK-47 into us. And the bullets were all coming from the side away from me. And the bullets were all seemed to be coming through the door. They weren't hitting either one of my guys, and they weren't hitting the door gunner, but they were just plastering the top ceiling part of the just above us, and some liquid started spewing out. And our side, the door gunner opened up immediately. Our 2 guys opened up immediately, and they killed this guy. And they said that I didn't see it. His body was rolling down the mountain until it reached the flat part where we had the landing zone. But in the meantime, the stuff is spewing out. The pilot has not made enough. He wasn't high enough. We were taking off the tops of the tree. And thank God it was the top of the tree where the branches were much, much smaller. But they were getting caught up on the rung below us, the pads where he landed on, and we had to raise up our feet. But now in the meantime, while all of this is going on, he busts through the top of the trees, so at least we're above the trees, about 4 or 5 feet. But the door gunners are throwing their M60s off. And then they take these huge canisters of their belt ammo and they're throwing them over. Then they're screaming at us to throw our rucksacks and weapons over. We threw our rucksacks over, took all the personal stuff and stuffed them. We took our rucksacks, tossed them over, machetes, canteens, sea rations, everything went over the side. But we would not throw away our M16s. There was no way. So, but that was what they were trying to lighten the load because we just weren't gaining any altitude. And then the door gunners got up and tried to plug these holes. Something was leaking down on us. I was afraid it was fuel and that any spark we would blow up. But that was not the case. Later on, I found it was hydraulic fluid. And he was losing control of the craft. And we were going down this slope now, 4 or 5 feet above the tree line, and it's all subducting down to this valley below, to this river, and then the wall. And all I could see was see us. We're going to crash into this wall. And he seems to be having a really hard time controlling, and he was. And we're going down fast, and I do not know how he did it. And I love chopper pilots for a lot of reasons, but this guy was good. I do not know how he did it, but he was able to maneuver so that when we got down to the river, we were still moving pretty fast, but he had got us so that we were parallel over the top of the river, and we were not, the wall was right there in front of me. We were just about ready to crash into it. And then I saw to my left, as we're going forward, what he was trying to do. There was an opening down there on the right side of this little river that had been cleared out. And then as I got closer, horror struck again when I saw that this clearing was not really a clearing. It had a bunch of tree stumps that had been cut off. It had been cleared out, but the tree stumps were sticking 2-3 feet up off the ground. And if that tail rotor got caught, we were dead because this thing was just going to go spinning around. And also he was going too fast. And I thought, well, why didn't he hover? Well, he couldn't. And he was having a hard time slowing it down. We got about 3 or 4 feet off, well, I'd say 4 or 5 feet off the ground. I think what he did, he flipped off the power. And we went straight down. And I don't know, we did not land on any of those tree stumps. We were inside the middle of them. And our landing area, it got pretty screwed up. But the blade is going around and the door gunners are screaming at us to get off, which they didn't have to scream very hard. And we're all scrambling off. And the tree line is up to the front of me where the wall is, the mountain. And we scramble like mad ducks getting up to the tree line. And of course, the blade's still going around. Dust is kicking up everywhere. And we get up into the tree line. And the pilot said that he had radioed our last location and they were going to be sending somebody to pick us up. And the 2 pilots had sidearms. I don't remember if the door gunners had anything. And we had 4 M16s. And of course, we were making so much noise, you felt like every NDA in the jungle knew right where you were at. And so we waited and we waited. And they finally, I could hear the blades of a chopper coming in, and I knew it wasn't a Huey. A Huey has a certain sound of a pop, and it was a Chinook. So then I knew what their priority was. They were going to haul that bird out, the Huey out, before they picked us up. And that's exactly what it was. The door gunner went out, he got on top, and they brought the hook down and they hooked into the top of that and they pulled it off. And then later on, they took the crew out in a Huey, and then there was 4 grunts left over. And later in the day, they pulled us out. And as we pulled out and went around, we followed a bigger river on down. and I knew it wasn't the direction of OK. And he was taking us to a fire base called Black Hawk, and because it was getting dark and he wanted us to land. So we landed at Black Hawk. We got out. The lieutenant there, it was a fire base. It had a lot of artillery. He gave us water. They gave us sea rations, and then the four of us split up and we did bunker duty that night. Well, the next morning, the lieutenant came over and said, Pugh, I need you. And he said, don't take your M16. I said, no, I take my M16. And he made sure it didn't have a chambered round. He put it on safety and said, hang it upside down. And I knew something was coming. And sure enough, this is where they had the pile of timbers that were all netted up. And my job was to get on top where it would all this netting been put together in this big, strong silver or iron circle. And here it came. The Chinook came over the top of me, and he started settling down. And he is kicking. The lieutenant had also handed me goggles, and then I realized why. The debris flying in the air was just unbelievable. The noise, and this bird is coming closer and closer and closer to me. There's a guy looking through a hole in the floor that's lowering the cable with the hook on it that I'm supposed to attach in the eye of the needle here. And the bird is getting about, I'd say 10 feet above me, but he's sinking 2 feet down and then back up again. And finally we get the connection made, and I saw the guy, he's talking to the crew, he's talking to the pilot can't see. And so he puts a thumbs up to me, meaning dive off of the pile. Well, when I dived off the pile, my boot got caught in the netting, and it flipped me down and hit my head right on the bottom part of the pile of timbers. And then my foot released, and I started rolling down the mountain. And I was laying there. The Chinook had put the pedal to the metal, and he was pulling up, and all of those timbers were going up. I was watching them go up, and I realized I got to get out of here. This thing, comes loose for any reason, I'm a dead man. So, and the first lieutenant came over, and as I was sitting there, he was trying to comfort me. He said, "You okay?" And I go, "Hell no, I'm not." And I thought to a movie that I'd seen 5 or 6 years ago here. I think it was called A Million Ways to Die in the West. Well, I tell you what, there's 1,000,001 ways to die in Vietnam. So that was the end of my Black Hawk ordeal. And then how much time do we have?
Well, Bill, we're about out of time, but I'd like to schedule you again in the next week or so, because
I would love that, because the main gist of
the main story about Cambodia and what you went through, that's a very important story we need to hear.
Yeah,
so
and, there's a lot of details about that, and there's a lot of websites I can have you send to kind of give you a flavor of what happened in Cambodia.
And there's a lot of those guys that you were with that we need to talk about and remember, because they gave their lives in Cambodia. But
I was in a squad of there were 6 killed, so there's a lot more story to tell, and I'm sorry this took so long.
Hey, these are good stories.
I'd be so happy to come back and continue.
But we'll talk and get you scheduled real soon so we can pick up where you left off. Here's a Facebook user said his uncle was killed in Cambodia, Pickles. So, we lost a lot of people in Vietnam, a lot of people in Cambodia and Laos. So a lot of people have been watching. So, but we'll get you scheduled again so we can pick up where you left off, because you were only there for 5 or 6 months in the jungle.
I was only in the jungle 5.5 months, and also
about 5 lifetimes, wasn't it?
Yeah, all these stories happened in 5.5 months.
It's crazy.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But we thank you for being on today. And
I
We
sure
have
appreciate everything. Thank you so
certainly
much.
enjoyed your stories, and we look forward to hearing more stories in the next week or so.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
Alrighty, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Unbelievable, Mary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't
He's
it?
got, he definitely got more than 9 lives. It sounds like
Absolutely. Can you imagine being 19, 20 years old and experiencing the things that he experienced? So
No, and that was, as we come up on Vietnam Veterans Day, and next week, it just reminds you of the difference. We talk a lot about World War II, but so many people don't realize that the average age in Vietnam was much younger. The number of days they were actually in combat was much greater. And it's crazy. And, of course, they're our largest group of veterans right now that have actually been in that type of combat situation is our Vietnam veterans. And, I know that I saw Bill Henry was there and made a little comment earlier, but, folks like him and Doug Peterson, and when he talked about the Doc, it reminded me of Doc Ballard. And
absolutely.
People that did things that we just can't even imagine. And we owe
one
them.
One of the stories that Bill's going to tell next time we have him on is about this medic. And it's unbelievable what that medic had to go through. And, I can't wait to hear that story about the medic that Bill's going to tell us about. So,
yeah, amazing.
Thank you very much, Bill, for all those stories. And for one Vietnam veteran with those stories, there's thousands and thousands of other Vietnam veterans that need to tell their story. And we're going to have Craig on. Craig's going to be a roll call. He's with the Texas Tech Vietnam.
Kelly Krager.
Kelly. Kelly.
Yeah, he's going to be at the luncheon, and he's going to meet with Vietnam veterans after the luncheon in the fireside room. And yes, his work is about capturing all of those stories for the Oral History Project. And so if any of our Vietnam guys, I sent that out. We sent that out in the email. We'll remind everybody on Friday at the luncheon, and the luncheon is this Friday. So we continued to try to make sure people understood that it was this Friday. It's the 4th Friday, and it happens to be in March. This year, there are 5 Fridays. So for those folks that RSVP'd, if you are not able to come because it is the 22nd and not the 29th, please let us know so that we can give that seat to one of the 15 people that are waiting on the wait list. So we have 500 attending, and we have 15 on the wait list. So, we definitely want to try to make sure that no seat gets left unfilled because somebody needs to cancel and they don't let us know.
And one thing I'd like to mention too is that, we have a lot of veterans that come. The majority of the people are veterans, but then we have a lot of supporters, a lot of other people. So I'd like to just kind of reach out to those supporters that come to be with the veterans. Let's let the veterans set up closer to the podium and closer to the front, because so many times you look out there, all the veterans are in the back and all the supporters are at the front. But I know all the little groups of veterans sit at the same place a lot of times. But let's try to help that. That's just one observation I had.
Yeah, we probably have about 20 to 30 folks that come to the luncheon that are not volunteers. So out of that 500, I went through and I counted them up this particular time, because we do have some of those. And so I counted up about 20 to 30 come who are not veterans and don't come with a veteran, like they're not bringing a veteran. They're not a family member or a caregiver or, you know, the driver, some relationship with a veteran that they are bringing. And so it's understandable that those folks are going to sit with the veteran that they're coming with. But
Sure.
to your point, for those that are coming that just love to come and be there and hear the stories and be with the veterans, if they could stay more toward the back and allow, or to the very far sides, and allow those veterans to be as close to the stage as they can. It helps with the hearing too, because a lot of our veterans have hearing challenges, obviously, right? You're around, you know, gunfire and, you know, any kind of different military equipment, planes, tanks, helicopters, whatever. And so your hearing gets affected. So a lot of these guys, you know, the vast majority are, you know, in their 70s and up. And so hearing becomes a real problem. We only have so many of the sets that work with the system at the church. So clearly, anyone that can move toward the back or to the far sides, that really helps to make it a better experience for the veterans, because it is a veterans lunch.
And the supporters, I mean, we love to have the supporters there because there's so many of them that do so much, you know, for our veterans, and just them being there is great because they interact with them and they hear things, needs that you and I might not hear, or other people that are regulars, and you know, it's just a great group of people. But
right,
we've also got something else exciting coming up, April 11th.
We do.
And you and I and General Pottinger and Ann Pottinger and some other people have really put together a good thing. Let me get to the slide here. And that is the war stories. Mm-hmm. That's April 11th, 2024. And tell us a little bit about what we have in store.
So, you know, we're kind of doing this in conjunction with Navy Fleet Week. They're bringing some folks in from Tennessee and going to be here for that week and getting them involved in the community and out and speaking with vets. So it was a good time to kickstart what I think it was Air Power Council, wasn't it, that did war stories for the longest time? And then COVID hit and it kind of went away. So we were kind of re-kicking war stories and hope to make this a more regular event. But on April 11th from 6 to 9, we'll have a meal, and there is a bar there. And right now we have 4, and I may have found a great Iraq veteran that may be able to get to speak that night also as part of the panel. But we'll have Don Graves, many folks know, James Vinson Jr., who is a Navy Korea War, Rex King, who we've had on the show, another great American Vietnam vet, Dave Etter, who is from the first Gulf War, and they will be speaking a little bit on their story, probably about 15 minutes, give or take. They'll share some parts of their stories. And then we will have an opportunity potentially, depending on how the time goes, to potentially have some question and answer. And the way we'll do that won't be the typical stand up, raise your hand, give them the mic. We're going to do it a little bit differently so that we can capture as many of those questions as we can. But it'll be a neat evening, and we'll have some other veterans there as well. So, you know, Ed Uraseri, who is a Korean War veteran, does a whole thing on the Frozen Chosen. We should have Jack Stowe there. You know, we'll have a few other veterans that will be in attendance that will spread out at the table so that they can sit with the folks that come to hear the war story, so that while they're eating or when there's not something else going on, they can actually have conversations with those folks at the table. So we'll have a few of those folks mixed in there too. So I think it's going to be a really great evening. The cost is, there is a cost associated with this for the 100 seats that we opened up. And that is really simply to pay for the food. We're not, it's not a fundraiser or anything like that. We're just paying the cost of putting on the event. So,
it's gotten to where just lunch, you go buy lunch and that's $15, $20 sometimes.
Right.
So
Go to Whataburger. Yeah.
this is $20 for a good meal and some good war stories and a lot of fellowship.
Right.
And we have to, I just want to acknowledge Matt and Jean Tuggy.
Yes.
They are some of the greatest supporters of our veterans in the military, Air Power Council people, but they have made a substantial donation to make this happen. So, Matt and Jean, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do through your dental practice and helping veterans. So, I just want to give a shout out to them. So
absolutely, so greatly appreciated, because we all know what the cost of everything is these days, and nothing is no prices are going down, and we still have to pay. You have to pay for the venue, and you have to pay for all the other things, and it really is the American Legion Post 655 in Haltom City is going to be our location for the event. And the neat thing about that is, one, so many of our veterans don't realize that they can join the American Legion because they've changed a lot of rules. So if you weren't able to before, you probably can now. And it's a non-smoking facility, which for folks like me that are very sensitive to smoke, it's a non-smoking facility. And I know that that's part of the reason that some folks don't go to legions or VFWs, is that some of them either still have smoking or they have the remnants of it still in the facility. But I've actually been to this one before for another event with Don Graves, and I could not pick up any scent of any smoke in the building. So it's really good for those folks that are saying, maybe I don't want to go because they're notorious for having smoking. So this one is good. It's safe. Come on out and just hear some stories. You don't have to, we want the non-veterans to come out and hear these stories. So any of our folks that are listening, if you can share this, it's on our roll call page, it's on our Hometown Heroes page. Please share it with all of your friends, because we'd really love to get these stories to more people that don't typically get to hear them.
And the same week is the Wings Over Cowtown. So a lot of things happening that week in April. As April 13th and 14th, NESGRB is going to host the Blue Angels. So this will be the first air show in 5 or 6 years, or maybe more, at NESGRB.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
That's an exciting time.
Yep. No doubt about it. Going to be lots of stuff going on out there.
I just want to give a shout out to some of our volunteers and some of our dear friends at Mary Isham, Keith, chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution. I have worked with them on several of their projects and spoke at their meeting, I think, and you've spoke there too. But
going to speak again at one on April 3rd.
Yeah, and they sponsored me and submitted me to receive an award. And, I thought it was going to be just like most award ceremonies where you just go there and then they call you out and do that, deal, or they give you the ceremony. This was at their state conference. And, I thought there'd be a whole bunch of recipients. But I went there. Of course, you can see that I'm a little more dressed up than usual. It was a formal occasion. And I met them at an assigned time to have pictures made with the state regent. And they assigned a lady. She was a CW5, Chief Warrant Officer 5, retired. And she was the state chair for the veterans awards that they were giving out. And she was kind of my handler, she took me down and walked in this ballroom, and I wasn't seated at a table. I was seated at the head table. And it was such an honor to receive the Outstanding Veteran Award for the state of Texas. And I just want to thank those friends of ours that come and serve every week or every month at roll call. Not just from that chapter, but also the Elizabeth Crockett chapter. We're very closely tied in with them. And, you know, it was just a marvelous evening. Here's some of the ladies from the chapter. And the lady to my right, on the right side, happens to be Larry O'Neill's sister.
Oh, be darned.
And our friend Larry O'Neill, because his mother was a member of this chapter for many years. And here's Candy Martin. She was the lady that introduced me and gave me my award with the state regent. But as we were sitting there, she said, you know, I'm a Gold Star mother too, not just a
I saw your
retired.
post on that. Wow, it was amazing.
And Thomas Martin, her son, entered the Army as an enlisted person. And after 2 years, went to West Point and was killed in October 14th, 2007 in Iraq. And, you know, that was just so special because then she said, do you know Terry Burgess? Well, you know, Terry and I are dear friends. And
everybody knows Terry.
We go to the Gold Star Parents Retreat. And, you know, there's just so special because, you know, I gave a little acceptance speech. And then I said, what you say? You know, this was really special and a great honor. But the greatest honor I had tonight was to hear about Thomas Martin and to meet his mother, because her son sacrificed his life for, you know, our country. But this Gold Star mother sacrificed so much losing her son. So, you know, you don't know how things happen where you meet people. But then yesterday, Charles C. Holler, the regent for the Mary Islam Keith chapter, called me and she said, I want to tell you something. My nephew also graduated that year in West Point. And I contacted him to see if he knew Thomas. He was Thomas' roommate.
Wow.
You know,
That's amazing.
Those relationships that we get whenever we go out to see how, you know, with Charlesy, her nephew, and Candy and her son, you know, we've got another connection. So
right.
Life is good, you know.
Yeah, it is. I think we lost Rick. Not sure what happened. Let's see if he could join back in, but if not,
I got all choked up and hit the wrong button. Anyway, life is good. Let's see. Thank you, Bill. You're a true hero. We appreciate Rick bringing you in to tell stories. Many Vietnam stories and experiences go untold for various reasons. It's important for non-military to know what our troops went through. Thank you for the shout out to Mary Islam, Keith. Yeah, there's, you know, it gets kind of frustrating sometimes because there's so many stories out there, and we just need to do everything we can to open up avenues. Just with like Kelly with the Texas A&M Veterans Center out there and the Texas Tech. I'm sorry, Red Raiders. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Texas A&M. But that's one of the largest depositories of veteran stories in the United States, next to the National Archives. So the stories are important.
They are very important. So if you are a veteran out there and you have stories to share, please, you know, we always hear folks go, I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. But when they share what we have found, Rick, you and I have been doing this for a while with veterans, and what we find is that when they finally share the stories, it gets easier and they're not quite so scary and they're not holding all that baggage and they're not alone. They're sharing those stories and they may help somebody else who feels like they're the only one that experienced that. And so when sharing stories with other people, and it's not just, war stories, but a lot of stories affect other people. How did you come through those? A lot of what Scott talked about last week, about the resilience and how do you move forward? Because we all have struggles in our lives. And if people like Scott and Bill and, the others we've had on can get through their struggles and their challenges, we might have different ones, but we know that we can come out the other side and life can still be good. And that's really, at the end of the day, what it's all about.
And such inspirational stories from the people we have. We're truly blessed to have had Larry help us start this podcast. And, we're going on 2 years in July, I think. So I'll have to go back and see. But we're getting probably 85 or 90 episodes where we've talked to some great people.
A lot of great stories, a lot of healing going on, a lot of helping going on.
We want to be around for a lot more. So, Mary, thank you for being here today. And Bill, thank you for telling your stories. And we're gonna have you back because Bill and I we talked quite a bit last night, and the stories of going into Cambodia and the horrible things that happened there. We need to hear that story so we can, hear about the sacrifices that some of our young men made. Mm-hmm. So
I agree.
Look forward to having you back, Bill. Mary, I will see you later. And we will have another episode next week of Hometown Heroes. Be sure and go to roll-call.org, and you can find more information, not just about roll call, but about the war stories on April 11th. Mary, thank you for all you do because you work and help with so many veterans, and you take care of a lot as you're a good first sergeant.
As do you, Rick. You're everywhere.
Not quite. Not as much as you, but thank you all for being a part of this podcast today. And God bless our veterans and our military first responders. And God bless America. And God bless the great state of Texas. We'll see you next week.